Right, so I had a very interesting question from a viewer in one of my videos that I thought was definitely important to address. And it was a question basically about the ego ideal. You know, this complex agency folded into the INFJ superego that provides a personification of what the person wants to be, what the person, INFJ person, aspires to be. And provides one of the figures that provides a template for the life project, for how the INFJ is to envisage the future. If you like, the vision of the future that the INFJ has is always, at some level or another, concretized, embodied in an idealized image that we call the ego ideal. And this ego ideal is formed, I believe, early in life, and it's not formed in completely neutral circumstances. It is formed in circumstances that are often reactive to a challenging environment of feeling misunderstood from an early time. You often hear about how NI dominance describe the feeling of being misunderstood as one of their cardinal experiences, almost a founding experience. And you sometimes get the impression, and it's a right impression, it's a correct impression most of the time, that there is a paradox in how the NI dominant expresses feeling misunderstood, because on the one hand, they seem to complain about it. On the other hand, being misunderstood is foundational to NI-dominant identity. So it's like there is this desire to be more understood combined with a less conscious, but nevertheless present and active dread of being understood, because, well, the dread of being understood issues from the dread of dissolving, the dread of one's identity dissolving in the case of proper understanding. Because so much of the identity building has been organized around not being fully understood, and this identity building is linked to the ego ideal, which is the ideal of a person who at some point in the future will reveal themselves to have had a kind of magical potential that was only there waiting to be realized and cannot really be deciphered until then. Even if this then is not very clear, it's part of how the ego ideal is articulated. This is a challenge for the INFJ person himself or herself, because it makes the ego ideal daunting. It makes the ego ideal easily come across as a figure that actually can never be even approximately approached, and is ultimately one important cause of INFJ helplessness. The sense that, yeah, I have something to give, I have high potential, but I just have no idea how to go about it, and I might well end up spending my whole life just being a failure at some level, just not meeting that target because I don't even know how to get there, So all these topics are imbricated, all these topics are mixed together and blended in extremely challenging and complex ways. And it is certainly true that one of the ways in which we can attack this issue is by trying to figure out how to calm down this ego ideal, how to make it more attainable, how to make it friendlier in a way, It's good to have ideals, it drives you forward, but if the ideal is from the get-go defined as something unattainable, how can you avoid existential malaise? How can you avoid a sense of existential uselessness? And that's a danger for NI dominance. It's interesting because the feeling of being misunderstood, and I think I'll talk about this more in future videos, is actually an experience that begins much earlier than NI dominants think. And at a time when it is not paradoxically mixed with a desire to remain misunderstood because the identity has been built around it by that point. Early on, when the INFJ is a young child, when there are actually no memories later in life of those phases, the feeling of misunderstood is already very present, and at a time when the child only desires to be understood. and it doesn't happen. And that is both key to the development of the anti-dominant ego ideal, the particular development of the anti-function itself, right? And so much that will influence the course of the next stages of INFJ life, you know. So how do you sort of go about calming this ego ideal? You know, the core challenge is to come to an understanding of oneself where, in a sense, renouncing those impossible to attain aspirations, those magical aspirations, because they're very magical aspect to this ego ideal that cannot be even approached. And of course, magical thinking is where we also locate the influence of early life thinking, because magical thinking is, you know, the prototype of early childhood thinking. So it's no surprise to find it there again, because a lot of what goes on there happens really early in life. You know, to identify what's magical in this ego ideal, to sort of manage to get to a point where one says, I want a more mature ideal, and this is not going to dissolve my identity. If you like, the reason why it's so hard for INFJs to feel less guilty, less existentially guilty, it's not just that they feel so guilty that, you know, that guilt cannot really be reduced without there remaining still other guilt. It has more to do with the fact that INFJs are attached, deeply attached to one of the operators that contribute to the guilt. They're highly attached to their identity as bearers of NI, and that includes the compliance, because unconsciously, of course, compliance are extremely attached to NI, just like all NI dominants are. A lot of INFJs, and I suspect a lot of INTJs too, feel unconsciously that if they were to let go of this incredibly demanding ego ideal, their NI uniqueness would dissolve. Their identity would dissolve. So it's a matter of identity survival to continue having this demanding, tyrannical, and ultimately existentially impoverishing ego ideal. So the key, in a sense, is to attain to a level of reassurance that no, my identity as an NI dominant will not dissolve if I let go a little. And in the next video, we're going to explore a bit more about how we can go about that, okay? Guys, don't forget my Patreon page. I need you more than ever, and I could not do it without you. So if you would like to support me on Patreon, you know, there's a link to my Patreon below. For a small amount every month or every year, you get access to bonus video content by myself, you get access to our Discord server, and you help me, perhaps the most important, to keep this going. Don't forget about my book, The Infinite Soul, which is my latest book on the INFJs in the world, concretely, how to be happy, purposeful, and rich spiritually in the world today for an INFJ. Get the book, first link below for The Infinite Soul. There's also a link to the Ecstatic Soul. My first book put my name on the map, and still to this day, the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. Link is below as well. Get the book, and I'll talk to you tomorrow, guys. Bye-bye.